Audio Jungle. Kamusta everyone? Welcome to another episode with NAMAD Films, where we bring attention to important social issues and amplify voices that needs to be heard. I'm Arielle Silva, and as always, I'm here with my insightful co-host, Chia Estipular.
Hi, hello! We're truly honored to have this conversation today. We're talking about something close to our hearts: education for Lumad and other Indigenous communities here in Mindanao. Access to education is a right, yet many Indigenous learners face significant challenges in securing that right.
And that's why we are here. To understand these challenges, to highlight the efforts being made, and explore how we can all be part of the solution. And we're not alone. We have our incredible guests with us: Dominic Brodie, Nathan Plaza, and Matthieu Talaboc. Welcome everyone.
Thank you for having us. I'm looking forward to this important discussion.
It's great to be here. There's so much to talk about, and I hope our listeners walk away with new insights.
Absolutely. The more we talk about these issues, the closer we get to real change.
Before we discuss the educational challenges, let's take a moment to appreciate who the Lumad and other Indigenous communities in the Mindanao are.
That is an excellent point, Chia. The term Lumad means native or indigenous in Cebuano, and it collectively refers to various ethno-linguistic groups in Mindanao who
Exactly.
preserve their traditions, their languages, and way of life despite waves of colonization and modernization. And by the way, their cultural heritage is incredibly rich. They have deep spiritual and ancestral connections to the land. Mindanao itself is home to diverse indigenous groups like the Manobo, the Bilaan, the Higanon, Subanon, and many others. However, despite their unique customs, they all share a common struggle: protecting their ancestral domains and securing a better future through education.
Exactly. And that is something we must understand. Education for Lumad children isn't just about learning math and science. It's also about ensuring that their cultural identity is honored and included in their education. Unfortunately, what we often see is the opposite, where Indigenous students are taught from a curriculum that overlooks their heritage, making it harder for them to relate and thrive in the classroom.
Now that we have a better understanding of the communities we're talking about, which are the minority here in Mindanao, let us dive into the key barriers to education for the ethnic learners, especially in these communities.
We've heard about the logistical challenges, how some children walk for hours just to reach school. But that's just one part of it, right?
Yes, geographic isolation is a huge issue, but so is the lack of school facilities. Many Indigenous communities either don't have schools nearby or have schools that are underfunded, lacking teachers, classrooms, and supplies. And in some cases, the nearest school might be several mountains away, and crossing rivers or unstable bridges is a part of daily commute for these kids.
And then there's displacement. Many Lumad families are forced to leave their ancestral lands due to conflicts, mining, and other external forces. This disrupts their children's educations and creates uncertainty about their future.
Let's not forget about discrimination. Some Lumad students feel prejudice when they enter mainstream schools, and their curriculum isn't always inclusive about teaching about their culture. Imagine being a child and not learning about your history, language, and tradition that is normally what you've been taught. Some Lumad students feel pressured to assimilate in a system they don't even feel recognized about their identity.
That is incredibly disheartening. Education should empower students, not alienate them. And this is why so many Lumad communities establish their own schools, to ensure that their children receive an education that respects their traditions while equipping them with the knowledge to navigate the modern world.
Speaking of challenges, one of the biggest setbacks actually in the recent years up until now has been the closure of Lumad schools, was not only affected the Lumad learners but also affected the other ethnic learners who are in these communities, such as the Manoba tribe. They have been restricted from attaining the sufficient education that they need for their future.
Right. In 2019, the government shuts down 55 Lumad schools, affecting thousands of students. The justification? These schools were supposedly linked to insurgent activities. However, many educators and advocates argue that these schools were providing much needed education in areas where government schools weren't available.
The closures had devastating effects. Imagine being a young student, excited to learn, only to wake up one day and find that your school has been shut. These closures not only deprive children of education but also cut them off from lessons that upheld their cultural heritage.
And since many of these children come from communities that rely on collective learning, taking away their schools meant taking away a crucial part of their identity and future opportunities.
So, moving on. Despite the challenges that they have experienced, these indigenous communities have remained resilient over the years, advocating and demanding change from the government, from the other communities to change the educational system. However, change is a collective effort not only from these ethnic communities but also from other people. So, now let us talk about some of the inspiring initiatives happening on the ground. Chia?
Absolutely. We've seen Indigenous leaders, educators, and non government organizations stepping in to fill the gaps. Some NGOs help rebuild schools into safe locations, while others provide mobile classroom and alternative learning programs.
The most inspiring thing is the commitment of volunteer teachers. Some travel to remote areas and teach from what they have, even with little to no salaries.
Community elders also play a role by passing down indigenous knowledge, ensuring that our children not only learn academic subjects but also gain a strong sense of their cultural identity.
So, just like what I mentioned earlier about change being a collective effort from not only the ethnic communities but also from other people, it is also time for us to recognize the efforts and the actions done by these indigenous communities in continuing to find ways to keep their education alive. Now, let us highlight some of the initiatives done to make a real difference, to make a big impact.
Many organizations and volunteers are stepping up. Some rebuild schools, while others provide mobile classrooms for displaced students.
The CC Development Foundation offers scholarships, supplies, and teacher training, ensuring culturally relative education.
Alcadev integrates sustainable farming into education, equipping students with both academic and livelihood skills.
The Sissy Development Foundation? It offers scholarships, supplies, and teacher training, ensuring culturally relevant education.
So, with all of this being said, as concerned citizens, as citizens who advocate for equality education for all, what can we do to support education for these Lumad learners and indigenous learners?
The first step is awareness. Simply talking about these issues and sharing stories can create waves of change.
If you have the time, volunteering is another impactful option. Groups like Rural Missionaries of the Philippines and Mindanao, Interfaith Services Foundation Inc. welcome those people who want to help in outreach and education initiatives.
And if you have the time, volunteering is another impactful option. Groups like Rural Missionaries of the Philippines and Davao Interfaith Services Incorporated open those who want to help in outreach and educational initiatives.
And don't forget advocacy, signing petitions, supporting policies for inclusive education, and pushing Indigenous rights all contribute to long-term change. Just like our advocacy and MIL that pushes people to demand change for these people.
So, as I wrap things up, I just want to say that this has been a very eye-opening discussion. Because as a learner myself, and I believe the co-host and the guest can also relate to this, because as learners, we couldn't bear imagine the struggles, the experiences, the challenges that they have to go through for them to attain the education that they are entitled to, that they have the right to. We couldn't bear imagine the struggles that they have to endure for them to learn. It is indeed a privilege for us to have the opportunity to learn, to study in this prestigious school, and to garner knowledge that we are entitled to. So, before we wrap up, let's take a moment to reflect on everything we've talked about today. We started by understanding the Lumads, their deep cultural roots, and the role education plays in preserving their identity. Then, we explored barriers to education, such as geographic isolation, lack of resources, displacement, and discrimination. We also discussed the impact of Lumad school closures, which have left thousands of students without access to education. Despite this, we highlighted the inspiring efforts of organizations like the SOS Network, the ALCADEF, and the Assisting Development Foundation, which continue to provide education to Lumad children. Finally, we talked about what we can do as citizens, such as raising awareness, donating, volunteering, and advocating for policies that support Indigenous education. Now, before we close, let's do one final round. What is one message you want our listeners to take away today?
That education is a right, not a privilege, and we all have a role to play in making sure every child gets the education they deserve.
That Indigenous knowledge is valuable, and we should uplift and celebrate it, not erase it. Indigenous learners should not have to choose between education and their identity.
And that change is possible. With every action, no matter how small, counts. Even just by sharing this conversation can help create ripples of awareness and action.
Beautifully said. And with that, we wrap up today's episode. Thank you so much to our guests for their wisdom and perspectives.
And to our listeners, thank you so much for listening. If this episode resonated with you, share it, talk about it, and take action in whatever way you can. Until next time, let us continue working toward a world where education is truly for everyone. And this is Arielle Silva signing off. Knowledge should be clear, yet the system distorts our voices. How can we learn when the system refuses to see us?